We're waiting to hear what's going on in the Chagos Islands, apart from anything else. Prime Minister's questions coming up today at midday, of course. It may well be that Kemi Baden will ask a question about Chagos, because it turns out that, according to the Telegraph this morning, Chagos is now not only being given away to Mauritius, even though supposedly the Chagosians don't want it to happen, but we're not just paying them £9 billion. We're now going to pay them double that, £18 billion. We got Con Coughlin here with us, Defence and Foreign Affairs editor and an expert in so many matters of diplomacy around the world over the years. Con, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I've likened this to me kind of giving somebody a second-hand car and saying, look, I've got this car, I'd like to give it to you. Normally speaking, I'd expect you to pay me for it, but in fact, under these circumstances, I'm going to pay you to take it off my hands, and I'm going to pay you such a ridiculous amount of money over the course of the next 10 years that you're going to be very happy. It makes no sense, does it?
No, and of course the other thing about this is the security aspect, because what we've got at the heart of this deal is one of the most important military bases the Western Alliance has, Diego Garcia.
Right.
And this is a really important base, particularly for the US. We use it as well. And from here, we have we've carried out all our operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. And by giving this whole territory over to Mauritius, which is friendly to China and other countries like Iran, we are jeopardizing our own security. So apart from the whole issue of taking away my second-hand car and giving you lots of money for the privilege, we are also doing ourselves an act of enormous self-harm. And the other thing, Mike, I would say is that, this deal is completely at odds with what's going on in Washington with the Trump administration. I mean, it is quite clear that Trump sees China as a threat, and you only have to look at what they're saying about the Panama Canal and Chinese influence there and the threat to American security. I cannot see the Americans signing this deal off.
No.
So here's the government bending over backwards to hand over this territory, give them money, everything else, at a time when they're going completely against the grain of what the Western Alliance actually requires.
Yeah, right. And were we not led to believe that, there were two things at the heart of all of this? That one, when the negotiations started, the British government wanted to get it all out of the way before the American election took place. They then kind of took, I suppose, stock of the fact that it looked as though Trump might actually win, because Kamala Harris was so useless that she couldn't possibly win. They then thought, maybe we'll just wait until, if Trump gets in, we'll have another conversation. And then there seemed to be a suggestion that they might have sort of handed over control of the negotiations to the US. And then it seemed as though they might sort of row back on it. But they seem to have now reversed once again and are now trying to push it through almost as though Trump won't notice. Yeah.
But this is a classic case of this government being led by lawyers, not leaders. Because if the government had an ounce of political nous, it would see the national security implications involved in this deal. It would also look at how potentially damaging this is going to be for relations with Washington. But instead, and the origins of this, let's not forget, is there was a judgment. It wasn't a ruling. There was a judgment by an international court that Mauritius might have a claim. That's all it was. But because Starmer and all his lefty lawyers are so obsessed with following legal judgments, they've done this deal to pursue the legal niceties, not the national interest. And it's just yet another example of how useless this government is.
Well, exactly right. And they're taking their lead from this International Criminal Court, which is so biased in all of its dealings that they've even suggested that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested if he enters Britain. David Lammy, of course, our Foreign Secretary, has said, yes, we believe that if Benjamin Netanyahu comes to Britain, we will enable his arrest thanks to the International Criminal Court. But they've sort of... Again, it's Keir Starmer, isn't it? He's the worst kind of lawyer who seems to be only interested and only motivated by what he regards as legal frameworks. So if he is given a piece of paper that doesn't have anything to do with the law, doesn't know what to do with it. But if somebody says, oh, don't worry, there's been a judgment passed by this International Criminal Court, or, here's some legal framework that explains how you can give away the Chagos Islands, he's happy to do it. But, I mean, almost everyone apart from him and Lammy, are going, this is a bad deal for Britain. What are you doing? And the Chagusians don't want it either.
Yeah, well, as I say, I I cannot see how the Trump administration is going to sign off on this deal. And it, you know,
can they actively block it then, do you think?
I think if they don't want it to go ahead, it would be very difficult for Britain, given how intertwined our intelligence and military alliance is, for us to ignore those concerns. So I think Starmer and co are going to be saved from themselves by the Americans, but it's a very unhappy position to be in, and we shouldn't have gotten this position before. And you know, when David Cameron was Foreign Secretary, one of the few good things he did, in my view, was to look at this deal and say, actually, this is not in our national interest. And I think, as I said, if this government had an ounce of political nous, they would see the damage they're doing to our future national security considerations and wouldn't go near this deal. And if they want to get lawyered up, then they should go back to these international courts and make the argument to justify our continued use and our sovereignty over this territory. That's the way to go.
Yeah, but that's the trouble again, you know, because they appear to have no sort of intellectual nous as a government. They don't seem to have any diplomatic skills whatsoever. You know, they sent old Jonathan Pole down there to do the negotiation for them, who's an ex-Blairite character. And they seem to be absolutely chock full of the idea that this is a priority for them, because if you think about all the things that they've done, some of which have backfired on them, you know, this is hardly something that anyone in the electorate, certainly anyone sitting in Sutton Coldfield or sitting in, you know, Glasgow or Bradford or anywhere, everybody's not going, oh, we must sell off the Chagos Islands. That's one of the major things that we must do. Nobody wants it to happen.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with this government. And you mentioned Jonathan Powell, and of course it is a reflection of the paucity of talent in this Labour government, that they're having to dig up all these old Blairites like Jonathan Powell, Peter Mandelson, George Robertson's doing the Defence Review, Alan Milburn's doing the Health Review, and it just shows you just how incompetent this government is. That they're having to fall back on people whose sell-by date was 20 years ago. Right.
Exactly right. Just while I've got you, Con, I mean, what's your take 2 weeks into the Donald Trump regime? I mean, he seems to be, you know, cracking the whip. He seems to be getting an awful lot of things done domestically. We already know that he's managed to get some hostages released in Israel. He's made noises about sorting out the whole situation in Russia with Putin invading Ukraine and all of that. What's your sort of take on how he's doing?
Well, he's certainly making waves. I mean, the thing about Trump is you can't ignore him. And, you know, there are lots of things about Trump when he was last president that I applauded, such as getting NATO to sort of wake up to the threats and start paying for their defense. And he's done some good things there. I mean, I think that the tariff argument is a dangerous one because, you know, he's actually picking on allies that. And, you know, given the threats we've got from Russia and China, etc., the Western alliance needs to show unity and resolve. And I think this whole tariff war could undermine that. And I think, you know, Beijing and Moscow will be looking at Trump and Europe, for example, and the threat of tariffs with the EU, and saying, well, the whole Western alliance is crumbling. We will continue to be aggressive. So I think there are challenges and there are risks, but he's certainly woken everybody up.
There's no question. And also his kind of what you might call bull in a china shop diplomacy appears to be working. I mean, it certainly worked in Colombia, certainly worked in Mexico. You know, the tariffs that he threatened appear to have got them to move on finding ways to put more troops on the border to stop people illegally entering the country. I'm told that, you know, their illegal migration stats are down 95% since he got in. So, you know, I mean, maybe he can teach us a thing or two.
Well, I think, you know, there are lots of people around the world, including here in the UK, who make the point that, you know, Trump has done more in a couple of weeks than most governments have done in a decade.
Yeah, totally.
And I think the fact that you can have somebody who comes in to power and immediately implements the manifesto he promised is something that people feel very sort of rewarding and uplifting. And I think there's a lesson here for people that, if you tell the electorate when you get to power you're going to do something, then do it.
Yeah.
And not
people might actually like you for it as a politician.
They might do. I mean, in my experience, covering this beat for 40-odd years, people like strong leaders.
Absolutely.
They like Thatcher. Yeah. They even like Tony Blair in his own way, because he had an agenda and he pursued it. And people look back at the Blair era with fondness. And I cut my teeth with Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, me too. Well, I said that. I wrote a piece for the Telegraph just a couple of weeks ago saying, you remember the phrase, well, it's morning in America. And it feels like that, doesn't it? The whited sepulchre on the hill, in the shining sepulchre on the hill, I think Reagan talks about as America. And that's how America feels again. Yeah,
golden age. But, I mean, there's a long way to go, Mike. And we'll have to see just how for example, the tariffs work in reviving America's economic fortunes. And the other thing that concerns me is Trump's made it quite clear he hates the idea of any form of military conflict. Well, sometimes you don't have an option.
Yeah.
And certainly if America wants to take over the Gaza Strip, I think they're going to find some stiff resistance. And as somebody who cut my teeth in Beirut in the 1980s when Americans were all being blown up by Hezbollah, if America starts wandering into the Middle East again, they could get a very bloody nose indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating stuff. Con, well, listen, we'll take the journey together, I'm sure. We'll be talking about it for the next 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency. Thank you very much indeed. Con Coughlin, Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor at the Telegraph, a man that's seen a few presidents come and go and a few prime ministers come and go as well.